All right, so this is a key on the worksheet where you're multiplying polynomials together. So let's go to number one. So number one, we have this monomial that's being multiplied by this polynomial. Now, a monomial is a polynomial. So you have a polynomial times a polynomial, but this is considered a monomial. So whenever you have a monomial times a polynomial, the best way to multiply this is to use the distributive property. So when I use the distributive property, we think like this. So remember, this is 4x times, so that's why we're multiplying. So you're saying 4x times 3x squared, and then 4x times a negative 5x, and then 4x times a positive 2. So in your mind, you're thinking this. Mentally, you're saying 4x times a 3x squared, okay, plus 4x times a negative 5x, which is what you see here, and then plus 4x times a positive 2. Okay, so that's mentally what you're thinking. And so here you're multiplying monomials together, so you're going to say 4 times 3 is 12. And then be careful, you're multiplying variables. So remember the power rule. The product rule. So when you have x to the first times x squared, when you multiply like bases, you add exponents. So x times x squared is x cubed. So this right here becomes 12x cubed. Okay, over here, let's think about what this is. So 4 times a negative 5 is a negative 20, right? X times x to the first, times x to the first is x to the second. So when you multiply like bases, you add exponents. But remember, plus a negative 20x squared is the same thing as saying subtracting 20x squared. And then over here, 4 times 2 is 8, so this becomes 8x. So that's plus 8x. All right, so that's the answer to number 1. So 12x cubed. So mentally, that's what you're saying. 4 times 3 is 12. X times x squared is x cubed. See that? 4 times a negative 5 is a negative 20. X times x is x squared. 4x times 2 is 8x. So very quickly you can get the answer, but you're thinking mentally this is what you're thinking. Okay, let's go to number 2. So number 2, we have 2/3 x times 6x squared minus 3x plus 4. So again, notice I have a monomial times a polynomial. So we're going to use the distributive property, just like we did. So be careful with this one because you do have a fraction. So you're saying, mentally, you're saying 2/3 x times the first term here, which is 6x squared. So every term in that polynomial has to be multiplied by 2/3 x, plus 2/3 x times that second term, negative 3x, plus 2/3 x times that third term, which is 4. So every term in that polynomial has to be multiplied by that monomial, so hence that distributive property. Okay, now let's simplify each of these products. 2/3 times 6. So remember, 2/3 times 6 is what I'm saying. So 2/3 times 6. So let's reduce. 3 to 3 is 1. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. So 2/3 of 6, 2/3 times 6 is 4. And then x times x squared, just like we did earlier, we're using a product rule for exponents. X to the first times x to the second. When you multiply like bases, you add exponents. 1 plus 2 is 3. So that's 4x cubed. Okay, over here. Now, notice, I want you to notice something. A positive 2x times a negative 3x, that's going to be a negative, right? So adding a negative, you're going to be subtracting here. Okay, so let's think about what we have. So we have 2/3 of 3. So I already put the negative here, so let's just think of this as 2/3 times 3. So the 3's divide out, just like this. So 2 times 1 is 2. So 2/3 x times a negative 3x. So 2/3 times a negative 3 is a negative 2. X times x is x squared. So adding a negative 2x squared means the same thing as subtracting 2x squared. Okay? Over here, I have 2/3 times 4. So let's think about what this is. So 2/3 times 4. I'm going to write 4 as 4 divided by 1. I cannot reduce. I'm going to multiply the numerators together. 2 times 4 is 8, and then 3 times 1 is 3. So the denominator, the product of the denominators is 3. So I got 8/3. So that's going to be 8/3 x. Now leave it as a fraction. Don't change that to a decimal. So that's 8/3 x. So that's the answer to number 2. All right, so that one was a little bit harder to think about compared to this one because of this fraction. All right, so be careful as you go through this. Okay, now number 3. Number 3, we have 3x minus 2 times 5x plus 4. So 3x minus 2 times 5x plus 4. Now notice this time I have a polynomial times a polynomial. So this is not a monomial like the previous two. So you've learned 2 ways to do this though. So let's look at both approaches. So the first approach, remember what we did was in terms of using the distributive property, we took each term in that first polynomial and we multiplied it by the second polynomial. So in other words, you're going to say 3x times that second polynomial plus a negative 2 times that second polynomial. Okay? So 3x times the second polynomial and a negative 2 times the second polynomial. Okay, now this looks like the previous 2. So it looks like the previous 2. So now I'm going to have a monomial times a polynomial. So we're going to use the distributive property. So I get 3x times 5x. And notice mentally you know what this is. So you can skip this step. But in your mind, this is what you're thinking. You're saying 3x times 5x plus 3x times 4. So every term in that polynomial has to be multiplied by 3x. So every term has to be multiplied by 3x. And the same thing here. Every term has to be multiplied by negative 2. And this is what this says. So we're going to distribute the negative 2. So I have plus a negative 2 times 5x plus a negative 2 times 4. So negative 2 times 5x, negative 2 times 4. Okay, let's deal with each product. 3x times 5x. So 3 times 5 is 15. X times x is x squared. So I get 15x squared. Okay, over here, 3x times 4, that's a positive 12x, right? Okay, over here, so this right here is a negative 10x. So adding a negative 10x means the same thing as subtracting 10x. So I'm going to write it like this. And then negative 2 times 4 is a negative 8. So adding a negative 8 means the same thing as subtracting 8. Okay, but remember, you can't leave your answer list like this because you need to combine like terms if you can, and those are like terms. So 12x and a negative 10x, 12 and a negative 10, that is 2. So this becomes 15x squared plus 2x minus 8. All right, so that's this one. Now, the other way you learned, let's look at number 3 again. So number 3, let's go ahead and rewrite it. So you get 3x minus 2 times 5x plus 4. So the other way was to use the FOIL method. So whenever you have a binomial times a binomial, you can use what's called FOIL. First, outer, inner, last. So when we use FOIL, now remember that you can only use FOIL if you have a binomial times a binomial. So we use FOIL, you're going to first means you take the first term of each binomial. So here's my first term, here's my first term, and I'll multiply them together. So that means 3x times 5x. So that's that first. The outer means you look at the terms on the outside of that product. So these would be your outer. So that's your first, that's your outer. So my outer is 3x and 4, so multiply those together. Plus, then we look at the inner, the terms on the inside. So these are the inside terms. So we multiply those together. So we're saying a negative 2 times 5x, right? And then plus, and then the last. A negative, so the terms, the last terms in each binomial. So a negative 2 times a positive 4. So a negative 2 times a positive 4. And I want you to notice that this FOIL method comes about from this distributive property we did. So you see, 3x, 5x, that's this, right? 3x times 4, that's this. Negative 2 times 5x, that's this. And then negative 2 times 4, that's this. Okay? All right, and so just like you did with the previous problem, you're going to simplify each product. 3x times 5x is 15x squared. 3x times 4 is 12x. A negative 2 times 5x is a negative 10x, so we're going to subtract. And then adding a negative 8 is subtract 8. Combining like terms, we get 15x squared plus 2x minus 8. All right? So when doing these problems, you could do it just like we did here. So 3x times each of the times the second polynomial, negative 2 times the second polynomial, and then use the distributive property, you get the answer. Or you can use FOIL, but you can only use this if these are two binomials, if you're multiplying two binomials. Okay, so let's look at number 4. Number 4, we have 4x plus 1 times x plus 2. So again, I'm multiplying two binomials. So let's look at that first approach. So the first approach is to take each of those terms and multiply by the second polynomial. So I have 4x times that second polynomial plus 1 times that second polynomial. See that? So 4x and then that 1. So let's distribute. Use the distributive property. So 4x, so in your mind, you know you have 4x times x. That's what you're multiplying. Plus, and then 4x times 2. Now, over here, I'm going to go ahead and write it out, but you know that 1 times anything is that thing, right? So 1 times this polynomial should be that polynomial. But I'm going to go ahead and write it out like I did this. So you're saying 1 times x plus 1 times 2, right? Okay, so let's simplify the product. 4x times x is 4x squared. 4x times 2 is a positive 8x. 1 times x is a positive x. And then 1 times 2 is 2. So that's what you get. Don't forget, though, you must combine like terms. So 8x plus x is 9x. So you get 4x squared plus 9x plus 2. And just as before in previous worksheets, always write this in descending order. So x squared, x, and your constant. So make sure to put in descending order. Now, if you look at number 4 again, you could have, since those are two binomials, you could have used the FOIL method, right? So FOIL, first, outer, inner, last. So the first term of each binomial, you're going to multiply those together. So this says 4x times x. The outer, so if you look at that expression, you're looking at the outside terms. So plus 4x times 2, right? And then the inner, the terms on the inside, so plus 1 times x. And then the last, right? So plus 1 times 2. And notice all these products is what you see here. All right, so rewriting, simplifying the product, 4x times x is 4x squared. 4x times 2 is 8x. 1 times x is x. And then 1 times 2 is 2. So notice this, same thing as this. Combining like terms, you get 4x squared. 8x plus 1x is 9x. And then plus 2. Okay? So, two binomials, you can use a FOIL method. Or you could do it this way. So you take the second polynomial, multiply by each of those terms, and then distribute. All right, number 5. So let's do number 5. So in number 5, we have this. Number 5. Okay, so here's number 5. We have 3x minus 2y times 2x minus 3y. Okay? All right, so notice I can use FOIL here because those are two binomials, so we're going to do it both ways again. So let's go ahead and do it that first way. So we're gonna take each of those terms and multiply by that second polynomial. So this term is 3x. I get 3x times this polynomial, 2x minus 3y, plus this term is a negative 2y, so keep that in mind, negative 2y, and you can multiply it by that second polynomial as well. Now using distributive property, I get 3x times 2x, so that's this right here, plus 3x times this term, which is a negative 3y, right? Now let's look at this. Plus a negative 2y times 2x plus a negative 2y times a negative 3y. Okay? All right, now let's go ahead and simplify each product. 3 times 2 is 6. X times x is x squared. Now over here, 3 times a negative 3 is a negative 9. So I'll be subtracting 9. X times y is xy. So that right here is negative 9xy, right? Over here, a negative 2 times a positive 2 is a negative 4. So I'm adding a negative 4. So it'll be minus 4. And then y times x is xy. So let's go ahead and write it in alphabetical order. So don't put it as yx because then that may confuse you. So y times x means the same thing as x times y. And now notice these two are like terms. And then last, a negative times a negative is a positive, right? So that is 6, and then y times y is y squared. So that's plus 6y squared. And now combining my like terms, a negative 9 and a negative 4, so I get 6x squared. So a negative 9 and negative 4 is a negative 13. So I get negative 13xy plus 6y squared. All right, now if you had used the distributive property, if you had used FOIL, this is what you get. So you're saying 3x times 2x, so the first term of each binomial. So 3x times 2x, which is this one right here, right? Plus the outer 3x times a negative 3y, the outside terms, which is this right here. Plus the inner, a negative 2y times 2x, which is this right here. Plus, and then the last, a negative 2y times a negative 3y, which is this right here. And then you just simplify each product just like you did here. So the rest, so notice all of this is the same as these right here, right? The only difference is this step here when you're distributing. Okay, so 3x times 2x is 6x squared. Positive 3x times a negative 9y is a negative 9xy. A negative 2y times 2x is a negative 4xy. And a negative 2y times a negative 3y is a positive 6y squared. Combining like terms, I get 6x squared. A negative 9 and a negative 4 is a negative 13xy plus 6y squared. All right, so that's number 5. Okay, let's look at number 6. So in number 6, you have this. You have 5x plus 2 squared. All right, now you have to rewrite this. You got to think about what this means. So this means 5x plus 2 times itself, right? That's what that means. And so now I can use FOIL or use the distributive property. So what I'm going to do is rather than doing both, I'm going to go ahead and take each of these terms here and multiply by the second polynomial. So I get 5x times 5x plus 2 times 5x plus 2. Okay, so now I'm going to use distributive property. And so I get 5x times 5x, right? So notice, I want you to notice something. Once you get to that point here, then it's very easy mentally to see what to do. Okay, so then 5x times that second term, which is 2. So this times this plus this times this, right? So that's what you see here. Now I'm going to distribute a positive 2, so I get plus 2 times 5x plus 2 times 2. So every term inside that polynomial has to be multiplied by this monomial. Every term inside that polynomial has to be multiplied by this monomial. And now using simplifying each product, 5 times 5 is 25, x times x is x squared. So that's 25x squared. 5x times 2 is 10x. 2 times 5x is 10x. And then 2 times 2 is 4. Combining like terms, and I want you to notice something. The fact that you're squaring a binomial, notice that those two binomials are the same, right? They're exactly the same. So when you get to this point, the outer and the inner should be the same term, 10x, 10x. And that only applies if you're squaring a binomial. All right, so combining like terms, I get 25x squared, 10x plus 10x is 20x plus 4. And there's your answer. And I wrote it in descending order. Okay, number 7, you have x minus 4y squared. So remember what that means. So that means x minus 4y times itself. So now we're going to use the distributive property. So I'm going to take each of these terms, I'm going to multiply by that second polynomial. So this becomes the first term times that second polynomial plus the second term, which is negative 4y, times that second polynomial. Okay? So this times this is what this is, and then this times this. Now using distributive property, you're saying, so every term in here has been multiplied by x. So you're saying x times x plus x times a negative 4y. And then go ahead and do the same thing here, distribute. So you have a negative 4y times x plus a negative 4y times a negative 4y. Okay? Now let's go ahead and simplify each of these products. So x times x is x squared. X times a negative 4y is a negative 4xy. So that's minus 4xy. A negative 4y times x is a negative 4. Oops, sorry. Let me go ahead and rewrite this. So x squared plus x times a negative 4y is a negative 4xy. I wrote x squared. And then remember, you're squaring a binomial, right? So this and this better be the same. So a negative 4y times x is a negative 4xy. Notice those are the same. Negative 4xy, negative 4xy. And then negative 4y times a negative 4y is a positive 16y squared. Negative 4 times negative 4 is 16. Y times y is y squared. Notice here, though, I meant to put minus because, remember, adding a negative 4xy means the same thing as subtracting 4xy. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and rewrite it that way. Okay, now combining these two, a negative 4 and a negative 4, those are like terms, xy, xy. A negative 4 and negative 4 is a negative 8. So I get x squared minus 8xy plus 16y squared. And that's answer number 7. Okay, let's look at number 8. So number 8, we have this for number 8. All right, we have x plus 2 times x squared plus 3x plus 2. Now, there's some work you got to do here. So for something like number 8, it's not that easy to mentally do this because you have to distribute and then you got to combine like terms. So mentally, it's not that easy. So you really should show the work here. So be careful because this is a trinomial times a binomial, so you cannot use FOIL here. So you are going to have to resort to what we did here. So you're going to take each term in this first polynomial and you're going to multiply by that second polynomial. So you're going to say x times that second polynomial, okay, plus 2 times that second polynomial. All right, and then you're going to distribute. So every term, and there are 3 terms here, you'll multiply by x. Every term in here, there are 3 terms, you'll multiply by 2. So mentally, you're saying x times x squared plus x times 3x plus x times 2. Over here, you're saying 2 times x squared plus 2 times 3x plus 2 times 2. So 2 times x squared is this, 2 times 3x is this, 2 times 2 is this. All right, now simplifying each product, x times x squared is x cubed, x times 3x is 3x squared, x times 2 is 2x, 2 times x squared is 2x squared, 2 times 3x is 6x, and then 2 times 2 is 4. Okay? So we get this simplifies to this simplifies to this, right? This simplifies to this, and so on. Okay, but remember, you need to combine like terms. So I have an x squared, or x cubed rather, and let's put it in descending order. I have an x cubed, but there are no other x cubes, so I'm going to rewrite it. Now let's get the x squares. I have 3x squared here and a positive 2x squared there. So 3 plus 2 is 5. That's 5x squared. The x's have a positive 2 and a positive 6, so 2x and 6x is 8x. And the only thing left over is this constant, so just rewrite it. So there's the answer number 8. Okay? So you had to use this approach. And mentally, there's no way you could have easily, without writing some things down, go from here to here. Okay, number 9, you have x minus 3 times 2x squared minus x minus 4. So same thing, you have a trinomial times a binomial, so you cannot use FOIL. So you are going to have to resort to taking each of these terms and multiplying it by this second polynomial. Okay, remember, this means product. So you're going to say the first times the second polynomial, so 2x squared minus x minus 4, plus this term times the second polynomial, 2x squared minus x minus 4. Okay? So now using distributive property, so every term inside this polynomial, inside this parentheses, has to be multiplied by x. And every term inside this parentheses has to be multiplied by negative 3. So in your mind, you're thinking x times 2x squared, that's a squared here, plus x times a negative x, plus x times a negative 4. That's what you're saying. 2x squared, x times 2x squared, x times a negative x times a negative 4. Then let's go ahead and distribute the negative 3. You're saying negative 3 times 2x squared, plus negative 3 times a negative x, plus, I'm running out of room, so I'll put it right here, a negative 3 times a negative 4. Okay? Okay, simplifying each product, x times 2x squared is 2x cubed. X times x squared is x cubed. Over here, x times a negative x is a negative x squared. So minus x squared. X times a negative 4 is a negative 4x, so subtract 4x. Over here, negative 3 times 2x squared is a negative 6x squared. A negative 3 times a negative x is a positive 3x. And then a negative 3 times a negative 4 is a positive 12. So that's what we have. And now we're going to combine like terms. I don't see any other x cubed, so I'm going to bring that down. A negative 1x squared and a negative 6x squared. So a negative 1 and a negative 6 is a negative 7x squared. A negative 4x and a positive 3x. A negative 4 and a positive 3 is a negative 1. So that's just a negative x. So don't write the 1. It's implied to be a 1. So just leave it with like this. And then finally your constant, which is 12. And so there's your answer in descending order. All right. And then finally number 10. So let's go number 10. So number 10, you have x plus y times x squared minus xy plus y squared. So x plus y times x squared minus xy plus y squared. So notice I have a trinomial times a binomial, so you cannot FOIL. You're going to have to resort to using this idea. So each of those terms has to be multiplied by that second polynomial. All right, so you're going to use the distributive property here. So you're going to say x times that second polynomial, just like this, plus y times that second polynomial. Okay? And now using distributive property in both cases. So you're saying x times x squared. So mentally you're saying x times x squared, right? Plus, and then you're saying x times a negative xy, plus, and then x times y squared. And now let's distribute the y. Plus y times x squared, plus y times a negative xy. I'm running out of room, so I'm going to say plus y times y squared. Okay? So x times x squared is this, x times a negative xy is this, x times y squared is this, and so on. Y times x squared is this. Y times a negative xy is this, and then y times y squared is this. Okay, now let's go ahead and simplify each product. X times x squared is x cubed. X times a negative xy, so x times a negative x is a negative x squared, so this becomes minus x squared y. So that's important that you see this. Over here, x times y squared is just xy squared. Over here, y times x squared is, and let's put the x first. So that becomes plus x squared y. So y times x squared is this right here. Okay, y times a negative xy. So y times y is y squared. So y times a negative xy is a negative x y squared. And then y times y cubed is a positive y. Y times y squared is a positive y cubed. Okay, so let's combine like terms. So be careful because you have different variables in here. So I have an x cubed, but I don't see an x cubed anywhere, so I'm going to rewrite it. Okay, now be careful. This is an x squared y. So do you see another x squared y anywhere? Right here, right? So a negative 1 and a positive 1 is 0. So those, I'm going to do it like this, those cancel out. Now see that? So I'm not going to put anything in here for those two terms. Let's do x squared, xy squared. I see an x squared y squared here. I also see one here. A positive 1 and a negative 1 is 0. So I don't see anything. I'm not going to put anything here. And then the only thing left over is a positive y cubed. And so there's the answer. All right. So you gotta write it like this. So don't put 0 x squared y and 0 xy squared. Leave it like this. This is the answer. So that's the answer you want. All right. Okay, so that is the key to this worksheet.